Welcome everybody to episode, I think we're on 3 now, of What's the Theory, where we discuss all the different marketing theories that are going on right now. AI has been a huge topic, so today we've got a special guest that we're going to talk to about how AI is changing paid media. So without further ado, please welcome Courtney. And I don't know, Courtney, if you want to say a couple of words of hello.
Yes, hello. I'm excited to be here. So I'm currently head of paid media at Search Theory. So I know some things about paid media and AI.
Just a few things.
Yeah, you.
So I guess on that note, talk us through your kind of paid experience and how, I guess, how long you've been doing this and what you kind of see going on in paid media and how you've seen it changed over the years leading into the AI world that we're in now.
Yeah, so I've been in paid media probably just over a decade or maybe getting on for like 11 years, which feels like a very long time. I'm probably like most people who I started off in PPC, kind of just fell into it. And yeah, I've been kind of seen a lot of change over that span of time. And I started off kind of mainly just in PPC. And then I eventually also kind of started working in paid social as well. So I've seen across both kind of different platforms, both Google, Bing, Meta, LinkedIn, kind of what sort of changes have been happening through the years and how to kind of adapt. I think it's quite interesting because with sort of the introduction of AI recently, within paid, there's probably been a lot of behind the scenes elements of AI that have been going on for a long time. But I think it's something that it wasn't necessarily packaged as AI, or it wasn't, something that kind of we were referring to as AI until sort of AI really became kind of mainstream and sort of accessible to everyone. And people started, kind of tapping into the actual term AI. But I think this element of kind of machine learning is something that within paid media has always been there in the background, because essentially that's, how it's always ran and worked, and how, these corporations like Google and Meta have progressed essentially, and how they've been constantly evolving their platforms. From when I first started PPC 10 years ago, it was incredibly, I guess, manual. And in terms of, the basics of kind of bidding on keywords and sort of really kind of looking through all your search terms and assessing what specific CPCs you wanted to bid on those keywords. We massively kind of go through rounds in paid media, in particular PPC, by there's different kind of best practices. The introduction of kind of reintroduction of broad match, as it were, in recent years has been something where we've come back round to. We kind of that fell out of favor using broad match, and people found it didn't work so well. And now we're at a stage whereby Google is like, our machine learning and AI technology is so advanced that you kind of need to put a bit more power back to us and let us figure out for you how we can navigate this next stage of search, essentially. So it's very interesting. And I think across
Yeah.
kind of paid media in and of itself, there is just always so much discourse about, kind of, is it for the good? How do you manage it? Some people, and it totally depends as well on like your client sizes, types of, clients you have, whether you're lead gen or e-com, how much you can actually lean into some of these new, new innovations and new things that are happening, how you're able to learn how they work best for you. Because if you don't have the budgets and if you kind of don't have the right type of account, it can feel like a lot of changes happening that you can't actually test and opt into as much as some of the kind of agencies and people who manage big accounts might be able to. So yeah, it definitely feels like there's so much going on. Um,
Hmm.
it's kind of like a little bit overwhelmed at times. But I think to people who don't work in paid media, in
Yeah.
terms of like the SERP itself, I feel like, with you guys from an organic perspective, you are feeling the impacts of how the SERP has massively changed. And I think from a paid media perspective, up
Hmm.
until this point, we're very much behind the scenes. It's all kind of like the workings of our campaigns and,
Yeah.
tools that we have for creative, how we can use AI within
Mm.
those. Whereas I think we're a bit of a turning point now, where definitely we're seeing, testing in terms of ads in AI. And that's where we're going to see kind
Mhm.
of how paid media sort of moves on to the next step of not just these tools that you can use behind the scenes, how it really impacts the
Yeah.
SERP. So yeah, it's kind of a
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point, like you said. No, I think it's interesting that you're saying that for us, it's very like obvious for SEO that it's changing, whereas for paid, it's a lot of it, like you said, campaign, the background kind of things. And I feel like a lot of people aren't talking enough about that. Actually, paid has changed massively because of AI, but because it's not visible in SERP immediately, people are not realizing it. So I guess with kind of what you're saying with how it's changed and all of the things that you've just kind of talked about, would you say there's kind of like you said that turning point that's coming where it's impacting performance and it's impacting how things are visible in SERPs, for example? Do you feel that Google's actually preparing you guys enough to say, well, this is what we're going to change and this is how you'll have to adjust campaigns? Or is it genuinely you log in and things have changed and you kind of have to figure out what to do now?
think Google is actually incredibly well, it's a tale of two halves. I think Google is adept at really sort of being at the forefront in terms of different types of innovation that it can offer you. So, we've moved campaign types like Performance Max
Hmm.
and AI, you know, they Google is always pretty good at kind of rolling these out, but not taking away what you currently have so that people have time to transition. And we always find with these new campaign types that straight off the bat, they never work that well. Typically, it's a case of if you're, say, managing smaller accounts, like
Hmm.
you'll wait for them to progress a little bit more before you opt into them. Um, so I would say in that instance, Google is quite good at transitioning those changes in. For example, with AI Max, which I think it did only launch last year or the year before, I don't know, all merged into one. But they're now essentially getting rid of something called DSA ads in, Google search, dynamic search ads, which essentially
Okay.
have been for ages a staple of kind of really useful for people to use if you want to use your landing page to kind of source information and serve your ads. Whereas now they're actually getting rid of those in favor of AI Max because AI Max essentially is supposed to do the same job. So we're seeing that, we're kind of moving towards with the introduction of PMax, it's now recommended to use that instead of classic shopping campaigns. So we're seeing how Google is sort of moving towards those campaigns, which it thinks is definitely sort of the way that it's going to go. What I would say is that what we lack from Google is clarity on reporting and insights and, sort of I guess, clear visibility on how it will be reportable and what kind of budgets will be going into AI elements. So, for instance, where we're seeing, testing of potentially ads going into Gemini results, AI overviews, things like that. There is no clear indication yet from Google
Yeah.
what that will look like for advertisers.
So you've talked about all the things that have changed, and there's a lot that has been going on in the background. And it's kind of like you said, Google's just with SEO is obvious. That's all everyone's talking about is how AI has impacted us. But for you guys, it's been so in the background. So now that you've kind of you are there and you're getting to do these things in the background, would you say that there is support from Google to say, actually, we're going to be making all these changes? So, for example, it's now going to be in SERPs and in Gemini and AIO reviews, or is it one of those where you log in the morning and it just suddenly happens?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a tale of two halves. Google is quite good at sort of launching, for instance, new campaign types and giving people time to change over to them and adjust. And we've seen, for example, the announcement this year that they're getting rid of dynamic search ads, which previously kind of scraped your landing pages and dynamically generated ad content and landed people in at the right places. And that is essentially being replaced by AI Max, which is, the newer campaign type, which relies on sort of
Yeah.
matching people based on signals. And it really does have that smart AI learning technology behind it. I think
Yeah.
the reason that Google sort of launches these campaign types like Performance Max, for example, and then allows people a long time to opt into them is because not everyone has the sort of budget or capability to be able to opt into them straight away. And I would say that typically what we see is these new campaign types launch, and then everyone's like, this doesn't work so well. It's kind of serving absolute rubbish. And we do see that they just, Google progresses them and innovates them over time to the point where they
Okay.
do work better. So I think Google is good at that element of kind of letting people know and shouting about these new campaign types, new tools that are available. I think where it probably falls short for a lot of people is transparency of reporting and what it's going to look like in real world budget terms. And, when ads do roll out into AI overviews and, kind of a lot of the new stuff that's been announced this year, kind of crazy like shopping stuff like universal carts and really changing how people are searching and buying across, kind of web
Yeah.
searching. What we don't have is clarity on, can I choose to invest budget in AI overview ads? What is that going to look like? What is the transparency? We've even seen that
Yeah.
Google is kind of moving for search terms, which previously, the data, search term data is invaluable. It literally tells you what someone has searched to, surface your ad. Actually, we're moving as we get conversational queries. Google has said they're moving towards thematic search terms. So, over time, we're going to lose what exact search terms people were searching for. And that's something that is invaluable data to
Yeah.
people, working in PPC, because it really does help guide your activity and kind of really understand trends and what is working. So there's a lot of these elements of non-transparency when it comes to the nitty-gritty that a lot of people in
Okay.
we work in the nitty-gritty of that stuff that just isn't
Hmm.
clear at all. And I think for other platforms like Meta, for example, I think they've probably always been a bit less clear than Google, I would say. Advantage Plus elements
Yeah.
in Meta have been around for quite a while. And I think in a similar way to Google, when they first launched, they don't work as well, and then they develop them and more people use them. There's more data going into it and they end up, working okay. But I think probably where Meta falls a little bit short is that there's sort of less communication over kind of what they're doing and how it's working, and sort of customer care in relation to, people platform and sort of wanting that insight. With Meta, it's a little bit more of a put up, shut up, just wait and see what happens to your campaigns kind of vibe.
Okay.
So yeah, I definitely think there's, it's going to be interesting. And even with, for instance, in the US, with ads rolling out across ChatGPT, that is going to be
Yeah.
incredibly interesting because, they've put the horse before the cart a little bit in terms of, they need to monetize ChatGPT and sort of roll those ads out, but the actual platform behind it and how that's going to work and how they're going to charge people and what that looks like and the performance of that really has come secondary. So there's a lot of different layers to, I think the technology is there, but it's kind of real time figuring out all these different areas of
Okay.
how it will work across paid media.
Okay. So I guess on that note, it almost feels like, because I know everyone's all about LLMs at the minute, it's almost as if for paid media, it's best to just wait it out because, like you said, there is no clear platform to do it. Whereas things like SERPs from Meta or whatever, AI overviews, there's a little bit more, I guess, there going on. So I guess the biggest one and this is just from personal experience, you've got all the shopping things that have been changing, and you've got all that AI help on that and ads on that are going on. What would you say has been the most helpful AI tool for kind of paid media specialists, and what you found that actually this is a good tool and this is a good thing to add to our campaigns? Because I know everyone's going on about PMAX, but obviously there's so many different things going on. What would you say is kind of the best ones from your experience?
I think it probably differs depending on kind of what clients you have and sort of what size you are. I would say the recent updates to Google's Asset Studio, so and Merchant Center specific, kind of you can literally generate sort of for your product images, you can generate scenes for the products to be in, or the new updates to the Asset Studio, whereby you can literally create videos, based
Wow.
off images. So you can choose two still life images and it will generate a video for you from those, is actually quite game changing for, kind of smaller agencies who have clients that just do not have the capacity, the budget to be able to create video content. that is actually amazing, and it saves so much time for everyone involved, and it puts, kind of smaller advertisers at a much even playing field, kind of everyone
Yeah.
has the capability there to generate video. Obviously, there is a lot that comes along with that in terms of, does everyone end up having really similar creative? Everyone's using the same tools. But I think, it really kind of does open up a lot of avenues for
Yeah.
advertisers, because video in and of itself, YouTube is so, massive. There are only more and more innovations coming for video advertising. And I think a lot of people probably felt left behind in terms of how much they could, the old Google videos were super jarring. Like
Yeah.
everyone knows, slideshow images and the text. It was so limited in terms of what you can do. So I think that is absolutely massive. I think, for kind of bigger advertisers, probably the elements of efficiency and being able to plug your first party data in and then kind of there's something recently that's been announced in terms of like prospecting audiences. So this area
Okay.
of kind of strategy where you can basically, kind of use Google's new technology to find people who are completely brand unaware. So Google is going to be able to categorize people who have had absolutely no interaction with your brand whatsoever. And you can strategically say, how much you're willing to pay and bid for those kind of people to engage with your brand. And it really adds a new element of, and this is super brand new, so there's not kind of a lot of learnings about it, but
Yeah.
this is where it's moving in terms of the AI technology of kind of using, kind of the conversational queries, the audience signals, Google and Meta being able to bucket people into, we understand your browsing behavior, we understand what you're looking for. And then advertisers being able to strategically use that information to kind of guide as a business how they approach
Mhm.
sort of audience buckets, and kind of, from there you can go, well, how do we amend our messaging? How do we amend our creative? And really sort of pull out from that kind of those key metrics that you have for KPIs, where you can say, well, we're willing to obviously spend a lot more on people who are completely not brand aware, and let's see how far we can get them through the funnel and sort of what their value could be, and then how we nurture
Yeah.
into returning customers. So I think on kind of bigger scales with bigger budgets and bigger data sets, they're, incredibly valuable tools that will be really useful.
Okay. So, I mean, that sounds like really cool stuff, but I think being a layman, so I'm obviously a CEO, have less paid media, but it sounds like a lot of it is actually more now for specialist professionals. I think in the past, a lot of, you could be a one man band and you could just turn on PMX and sort of hope for the best. Not everybody did it great, but, they tried. So I think it kind of almost seems like they are valuing professionals. They are realizing that these aren't, I would say they're not your everyday tools that anybody can just log in who's never done paid and decided to just switch it on and do it themselves. It's not a DIY situation. It's actually, you need to understand what you're doing and you need to have the knowledge to be able to utilize these tools, because like you said, for massive campaigns they could be really great, but you wouldn't put that in the hands of somebody who's never interacted with paid before, or Google, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it is quite interesting, because I think there's always a discussion with these sort of, AI introductions, innovations of, oh, well, what do people who manage PPC, what can you do? What do you have control over anymore? And there are
Yeah.
elements there where Google is taking away that control, but I think where the expertise comes in is really understanding, and kind of digging around in what the changes that are being made and how it's changing the inner workings of these campaigns, and
Yeah.
kind of really
Yeah.
having to adjust to where else you have to look to the
Yeah.
insights, and then what you have to change to kind of make actions on the back of those insights. And, even though
Hmm.
all these new changes are coming, it really is for each individual, kind of manager and advertiser, it's an individual choice to when you opt into these things and how you scale them, and the information that you glean from them, like even PMAX and kind of switching that on. You have to be looking at your channels and how
Yeah.
different channels working, how does display work versus how does YouTube work, and sort of really understanding those different platforms, how Google shows your ads across them, and how for your
Hmm.
industry that you're advertising in, how do they actually work, and how does the audience engage with those? The spectrum of industries and sort of
Yeah.
lead gen and e-com and, different kind of life cycle stages of customers, all of those things, they're not going to work the same across all of Google's platforms and all these different campaign types. So it really is a case of understanding what it is that Google is kind of implementing with these AI features and how you have to change how you look at your data, and
Hmm.
assess sort of, do I know my audiences? Do I know how to find them? How am I talking to them? Even now the
Yeah.
recommendation is with people using conversational queries. Well, how does that filter through to your ads? Kind of back in the day, you could literally write an ad and be like, sort of like, best in the business, buy now with us, and people now, oh,
Yeah.
that's so abrasive, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
put through CTAs that, kind of it was always considered put a CTA in your ad. Really now it's a case of, gosh, that stands out probably for the wrong reasons.
Hmm.
When people are seeking your products, your services, actually, how do they want to be spoken to and what is it they're looking for and how do you talk to them? I think we've
Yeah.
had this discussion a lot and we've kind of presented to clients a lot over the past few years about how the psychology of search is changing and how people are using
Yeah.
search engines and LLMs. And I think that's
Yeah.
filtering through to paid. And even recently, there was an update to Google Ads kind of terms of service whereby
Yeah.
they basically acknowledge that they're going to be using conversational kind of queries sort of for advertising. So they're going to be kind of looking
Oh,
there,
wow.
they're going to be using that. They've also kind of within those terms of service sort of said, there'll be elements of automation, but actually the advertisers, you're responsible for anything that is kind of, put out there. So
Okay.
they're kind of pushing that back onto advertisers to say, we're giving you this automation, but like you're responsible for anything that is generated, which obviously is, really nice. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of, kind of those behind the scenes sort of changes that are happening that I think just the strategy of it, you really have to be kind of thinking, what is it that I want to do for
Yeah.
my clients? And realistically, all these things, what is actually, the premise is the same, what is going to help me achieve that? But I need to really understand these product innovations because,
Mm.
it's not just a case of kind of people searching for that, two
Yeah.
two-word search term anymore. I bid them up
Yeah.
here on the ad, kind of I've got them on site sort of thing. Yeah, there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, I think that that's the thing that makes it a bit more exciting because actually it's like you said, it's giving the power back to the managers, the advertisers. It's the strategy, the audience. It isn't just as simple as, well, I'm going to turn this on and like you said back in the day, you just put
Yeah.
into keywords and say, well, these are the keywords I want to rank for. These ones I don't want to rank for. And it's kind of, you had your yes list, your no list, and that was the end. Whereas now it's so much more than that. There's so much more data. And I think that's the big side of it, is that actually there's a lot of data collection that people aren't aware of. That's why all the GDPR stuff came in and all the consent modes and everything. And it's impacting and it's kind of changing everything. But I would say, actually, from an advertiser perspective, for the better, because you do have so much more to go on and you have to be more strategic. But actually, if you're more strategic, it probably helps with the budgets. It helps you not waste money. There isn't that kind of leaking bucket of, well, I've had all this money on these clicks that just don't matter. I can actually properly kind of change everything now. And I guess with Google making all these changes, you kind of touched a little bit on Meta. I know Meta is a touchy subject. Everyone complains about Meta because the business fee is just the worst. No one can ever get in and out of it. Nothing works. But I suppose, have you seen any changes that they're trying to do with AI? Is there anything that they're, apart from things like you said, Google changing the visual side of things? You can make videos, you can make all of that, which, to be fair, that in itself is a whole separate topic, because actually we're not allowed to write content with AI, and that needs to be, websites need to be fully, you can't use AI because it won't rank. But actually for ads, completely fine. You can AI everything. It's almost like, what is the rule? But how do you find that changing on Meta? What are you seeing happening there?
Yeah, I think probably with the creative elements and sort of images, and Meta's always been, I guess, a little bit ahead of that, just in because of the nature of Meta, being such a visual
Yeah.
platform anyway. I think Meta's kind of continually been sort of consolidating in the background those tools and kind of improving them. So, the same is available in Meta, whereby now you can do the AI image generation. And there's so many additional things you can kind of put on your ads in Meta. So it can choose, kind of the music for you. It's got some really clever, kind of elements of tweaking your messaging based on the personas. So it kind of is really trying to amalgamate the ads that you have, but tailor them to all the different potential personas and audiences you have. So I think there's a lot that it's kind of trying to allow you to do in sort of its ad editing elements with Meta. I think probably, the Advantage Plus kind of, you can get Advantage Plus across your budget. So how you're spending your budgets and across your audiences. I think probably with Meta, the Advantage Plus audiences have been there for a while, but I would say in terms of reporting and kind of updates, that's something that hasn't really changed much. So in terms of,
Okay.
we're seeing lots of advancements in terms of your ads and what's available in terms of editing suite. But in terms of audiences and kind of targeting, that's probably the area that advertisers themselves still have to be, and kind of rightly so, still have to be the most strategic about and really think and assess and test kind of how you're bucketing your audiences and how you're targeting people. I think Meta's also always tricky because, you really have to assess your data and kind of really analyze the elements of where your ads are serving, your placements and what's working. It's always been a little bit more of a black hole probably than Google.
Okay.
Meta has always been one of those channels, probably for a lot of people, and especially if you kind of have smaller budgets that you really have to sort of prove its worth, as it were. I think we've moved now as an industry probably a little bit past that because everyone, is across socials and kind of can see those, ads and sort of definitely trust a bit more how they work. But yeah, I think with Meta, probably the ad stuff is kind of there and constantly innovating, probably the audience elements. There's a lot, I'm sure, going on in the background, but that just doesn't seem to be updating as much. But I know as well, probably all of us see from when you scroll the feed yourselves now, there's a lot more labeling of AI.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite interesting because, it is an automated system. So, it's not, sometimes there could be elements of actually content
Really?
AI that is potentially,
Wow.
yeah. So, and when obviously creators post or anyone kind of, you
Yeah.
can opt in to say if you've used AI content and there's a little
Yeah.
say AI info. So I think
Yeah.
they're probably trying to be a bit more responsible, maybe in terms of, well, on one hand, trying to be more responsible, but I think also passing off some responsibility. Again, kind of like Google with the change to the ad service terms, whereby
Yeah.
it's like, look, we're going to do this AI auto generation work for you, but you put anything into the system. So, like, whatever we spit out is your responsibility. I feel like it's kind of the same with Meta, where
Yeah.
well, now we've given you the functionality to say if you're using AI, we're not going to pull people up as much because you all know AI exists. So, kind of use your own brain, as it were, to sift through what you think is right and not. So, definitely feel that
Okay.
still some gray areas in terms of how sort of, transparent elements of AI are on both
Yeah.
platforms, really. But yeah, I think it's definitely Google has sort of really hit the ground running with AI innovations across ads. And I
Yeah.
think probably over the next couple of years, we'll actually see it condense some of those new tools. I think it's this year, especially, it's announced so many new tools, even from a strategic perspective, something called like an advisor, literally like a AI, chat that you can continually be talking to about your business goals, and it can look at your campaigns and it can tell you what it thinks you
Mhm.
do and like work with you to work towards those business goals. I think sometimes with Google, it kind of throws everything at, kind of ads and management, and then it will kind of pull back in terms of what actually works, what people, adopt, what people
Yeah.
like using, because I think it can be very overwhelming for an advertiser to have to try and use all these things and kind of opt into them. I think with Meta, they sort of kind of slide those things into, kind of the ads manager anyway. And it can be really annoying when you're managing ads on Meta because you'll just have all these little pop-ups that are like, opt into this and this will make your ads better. And you really have to be like, right, how is my ad going to change? Like, if I tick
Yeah, yeah.
box, it's gonna, we've had that with clients in the past where you can try it, you tick that little box, or there's a setting somewhere else that is ticked that you haven't opted into in ads, and somehow
Ah,
ads look
yes.
crazy in the feed. It's like, for goodness,
Yeah, yeah.
more sneaky in that instance, Meta for sure.
A bit more sneaking and not always helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So I guess kind of I feel like there's a lot that we learned here, but if you had to summarize and kind of say your top three, I guess, pieces of advice, kind of golden nuggets, knowledge that is worth knowing in how AI is changing all of paid advertising, what would you say are kind of the top three things to maybe look out for or consider in your strategy or be aware of with all these AI changes and how they could impact your current strategies or future strategies?
I would say probably number one, just in general, is kind of like sign up to those newsletters that put that information in your inbox. So I think it's really helpful. There's so many great kind of like forums out there, like Search Engine Land, for example. If you sign up to that newsletter and they drop a little roundup in your inbox, that will essentially say this is a new product feature that's come in. And I think it doesn't mean that you have to go into your account and adopt all of these things, but I think it's really important to be aware of changes that are happening. And, there might be some things that you think, oh, that's not applicable to me, but there might be something that's like, hang on, that's kind of cool. And I think it could work. And therefore, I can take that to the client. And even if, your client isn't kind of on board yet, it's something that you can maybe plan for a strategy a little bit down the line. So I think just even staying up to date with information and because so much is happening, just having it kind of in the back of your mind or making little notes about, things you've read is really useful. I would also say kind of really, I guess, look at your data in your accounts and sort of assess how you're using that data and really understand how it is changing. So, for example, with search terms, are you kind of seeing a lack of clarity there? And if you are, sort of have a look at, what campaigns is that coming from? What kind of, are you aware on what channels you're actually serving across and what is actually driving the value for, your client and the products and the services that you serve? Because I think maybe the old ways that we used to look at data is, it's not as simple anymore. And it might just be a case of, kind of adding in some new custom columns that give you a little bit more insight in terms of, impression share, for example, that's changed so much. And if that's something that your client used to be really keen on, and actually it looks a bit different now. It might look different because the way that it's being reported is different and the way that impressions serve are now different. So adding in a little custom column might help you to sort of understand and feed that data back in a way that you kind of used to. And what would be the third point? I guess just when you have chance, sort of explore some of these new tools that are available. I think it can be really hard if you kind of don't have massive clients or massive budgets. It can feel like you're being a little bit left behind if you actually can't implement, say, for example, AI Max, like you don't have the budget to be able to implement those campaigns that give it a go. But I think, potentially try and look at how can I do some testing or how can I go into the asset studio and, sort of generate some videos or generate some images, see how that works, see how I could potentially use that for my clients and sort of maybe gradually try and get clients on board, because I think what's going to happen is that these campaign changes, they're happening no matter what and they're coming. And I think we really have to sort of be sort of wary of how they work, but also just plan
Yeah.
ourselves, really plan ourselves,
Yeah.
kind of make it less scary and just knowledge, read up on them and kind of maybe plan out a little timeline of, look, I want to get AI Max implemented because, if you're running DM, then you can't create them from September of this year. So if they work for your client currently, like you need to kind of make a little timeline of how can I sell this into the client to kind of introduce AI Max and how am I going to test that so that I can really try and make it work for my account. So yeah, just kind of stepping back and planning those elements of AI campaigns and tools really. alongside your
Mm,
general normal optimization. And
day to day.
yeah, on top of everything else you probably have to do.
Yeah, always busy. Oh, that's really great. I think a lot of, I suppose, advertisers have a lot of their work cut out for them, and it sounds like there's so many changes. And like you said, it's bombarding you with all these tools that then they'll have to scale back. But it sounds like positive changes, I would say, especially on the data side of things. So I think it'll be really interesting to watch the kind of channel change and grow over the next, I would even say months, not even
Yeah.
years, because it seems to be moving so fast. But yeah, thank you so much, Courtney, for joining us today and for your insights and everything that you've kind of shared. I think there's so many nice little golden nuggets that we've got there that a lot of people can take away from this. And as always, we are around. You can find Courtney on LinkedIn. I'm sure we'll link to her somewhere.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us today, Courtney, and sharing your insights. And don't know if you want to give one last piece of wisdom before we end the episode.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me. I guess just kind of keep using your brain, it's not going to do it all for you. So trust yourself, trust your knowledge that you've, kind of learned to this day, and just, yeah, use your brain, guys. That's always good.
don't don't let
Don't
robots
give
take
in to the
over.
robots. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, guys, and thank you for listening. And we'll see you in episode 4. I think this is okay. That's interesting. It's still recording. I hope it recorded with me. I can't actually physically stop this. How do I stop this? We should have a bloopers. Okay. Is it off now?
It says recording.
I know it keeps recording it. So you're gonna have like a solid 8 minutes of me just sitting here and going, how do I stop this?
One sec, let me rejoin as, I don't know if it joined me as a producer. One sec. There we go. Okay.